Yo, what is up? What's good? What's going on? This is Boxing Talk Live on a Thursday, and we got a few things that we're gonna be talking about. Of course, we got something that's going down this weekend for y'all to check out. We're going to be, going through a few of those topics there, man. And I mean, here's the thing, man. Uh, but what the first thing is on this docket. Uh, it said in the description, it, and it says Crawford disappoints fans. Man, listen. Um, we talking about disappointing fans, right? We got this thing going on with Terrence Bud Crawford. Yeah, Terrence Bud Crawford is the WBO welterweight champion, right? And there has been a lot of talk about, who Terrence Crawford is going to fight. Is going to fight this guy? Is going to fight that guy? Um, you know, if there were these opponents that are out there for him to fight. Uh, it's talking about, what the options would have been for Terrence Crawford. Um, it had something there. Let me see if I could pull something up, man, because I want to go into, you know, um, one of these things here with what was said a couple months ago. So let me see if I go through this thing here. This is back in June 16th. It says Bob Arum outlines Crawford quintet of foes: Pacquiao, Porter, Ugas, Brook, and Thurman. And it says the top-ranked boss Bob Arum has the tall task of fighting pound-for-pound stalwart Terrence Crawford, a formidable opponent. The 32-year-old, the WBO 147-pound champion, is yearning for a career-defining fight. And if Arum has it his way, he'll be able to choose from a pool of five welterweights that include Manny Pacquiao, Sean Porter, Kell Brook, Keith Thurman, and your Dennis Ugas for a clash in either September or October. We have to look for Terrence Crawford to fight a major welterweight. Pacquiao is the opponent that I would most like Terrence to fight, and I think he would. Now, it requires a lot of money, and we've had proposals from the Mideast. I don't know if these proposals will be available for this year. That is the problem. I don't know whether Mideast venues will allow spectators this year. They may not allow it until there's a vaccine. Well, I mean, that, is talking about the thing for that. So that's kind of like the whole situation that we have at this particular point. Well, at that point, in reference to June, but as far as like fast forwarding to now, now we see that that is kind of out of the case because of all of those guys. They look like they're going to be uh, choosing one particular fighter off that list. Um, and it's not really something that, looks like a good little choice there. So, this is not like a good look here overall for Terrence Crawford, man, because I wanted to kind of like go through that list of fighters that they had on there: Pacquiao, Porter, Ugas, Brook, and Thurman. and how things didn't work out. But I'm gonna see if I could get my guy to join in with me here. What's going on, man? Chilling, man, chilling. What's happening?
Not much, man. What's the topic?
Right now, I'm talking about the whole thing with Terrence Bud Crawford, or like how a certain rumor reporter says Terrence Bud Crawford, and how this whole thing is basically worked out how we basically predicted when it came to the opponent that Terrence Crawford was going to end up having.
Yo, so I'm seeing a lot of Bud apologies. And Mr. JR, I can't really talk long.
Right.
I needed to put this on your platform.
Right.
I see a lot of Bud apologies that every time something comes up in negotiations, they always make excuses for the top ranked side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so some Mike on Sports said 1.5 was a very lucrative offer. Oh, and what planet? The one planet is 1.5 million to fight Terrence Crawford, lucrative offer. The first thing people would say, well, it's in a pandemic. They said a pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So American got 5 to fight Terrence Crawford. And so you're going to dial back my paycheck because we're in the pandemic, 3.5 million? Are you dialing back Terrence Crawford's 3.5 million? So I would say customary. If Bud hits about 3, Brooks should get at least 2.
At the very least.
At least 2. So what I can gather is they're just going to keep lowballing quality fighters and then come with the narrative, oh, he priced himself out. We're in a pandemic. And go fight Tim Zoo, a Mean Machine, or somebody like else in the budget.
Or Ray Robinson, or
I like Ray. I think that's a tough fight.
Yeah, it's a tough fight. But I don't think it's a Ray Robinson they're going to fight. They're probably going to fight someone else.
Yeah, but somebody under the top ranked banner while still pumping out the bullshit narrative that everybody's afraid when they're clearly not.
Like it like I'm like, how is it when Sean Porter said that when he talked to Terrence Crawford about a fight, it was saying now it's not the time. I'm like, how do you say that when that would be easily the biggest fight that you would have in your career? Like, what is it that you want to do? Everybody is saying, oh, you want to fight Errol Spence, you want to do this, you want to do that, but are you just going to, take a lighter path to Errol Spence? Like,
yes.
Like you can't have Errol Spence going up against Danny Garcia in his return to the ring, and you turn around and you face a guy like Kell Brook. Like Errol Spence's 3 fights would be Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, and Danny Garcia. You're going to tell me that you're going to be fighting like an Amir Khan, Kavaliauskas, and a Kell Brook, and people are trying, or you think people are going to buy that for someone that's supposed to be among the top in the pound for pound list? That can't work.
Listen, it is going to work, and it has been working because they're going to still pump out the narrative that the PBC guys are scared. It's an old top rank formula. He did it for Pacquiao.
Right.
He's doing it for Bud. Everybody on that side scared. Floyd scared. And some fans are starting to wake up to it. Mm-hmm. What you got is diehard core fan base that's just like, yeah, they ducking Bud. They're coming up with every excuse of why this offer is good and why this fighter doesn't deserve this.
Mm-hmm. And I was just on with Mike, and he said that what have like these guys done to deserve to fight Terrence Crawford, or like what has your Dennis Ugas done to deserve to fight Terrence Crawford? And I'm like, what has Go Brook done right now to deserve to fight Terrence Crawford? Like what notable fight has he had over the past 3 years that says, oh, he should be able to fight Terrence Crawford?
Yo, and then the thing that cracked me up was when they were saying 1.5 is good. They pulled up Brooks, what he's made his last 3 fights. It was like, yeah, he made 1.5 million his last 3 fights. It was like, yeah, but he wasn't fighting Terrence Crawford now, was he?
No,
They get paid for the quality of opposition and the magnitude of fight.
Yep.
It's not rocket science.
Yep.
There's a difference between me building a shelf and then me building a house. You want to pay me shelf money for building a house? No.
No.
And it bothers me that these so-called fans that claim that they want the best to fight the best, but will co-sign a bullshit offer that clearly ensures that this fight won't happen unless they go up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you don't want the best to fight the best. You just want to dick eat your favorite fighter.
Right. And me just getting off the conversation with Mike about the thing here with Crawford. And he talks about, oh, why couldn't they put Crawford on pay-per-view? And I'm like, why not? You have PBC putting up a pay-per-view event with Errol Spence and Danny Garcia. You have Showtime putting up Tank Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz and a Charlo doubleheader. And in all of those, even with the one with Tank against Leo Santa Cruz, those are viable, those are good fights. Those are very good fights in their respective weight divisions. What makes a fight between Terrence Crawford versus Kell Brook a respectable fight?
To me, it is respectable because he will still be the best opponent that Bud's ever fought. That wasn't 5 inches smaller than him. I'm gonna say that.
Yeah, and that's saying much right there.
That says a lot.
That says a lot.
He will still be the best opponent that he's ever fought. And at the end of the day, are we going to, from Terrence Crawford, are we going to hold him and his team accountable or keep blaming the other side of the street for them not giving us the fights that he wants? There are fights available that they are not willing to give. And the reason why they won't put Bud on pay-per-view is because Bob knows that Bud can't sell. And if those fans bought pay-per-views with the same vitriol that they defend him with, maybe his pay-per-view numbers that
pretty much is the situation, because you've had Crawford in these type of events before. They put him on a pay-per-view against Victor Posol in 2016. And you saw how far that went. They put him in a pay-per-view type event, against Khan or something like that, and you see how far that goes. So it's like, okay, that you're not getting much out of that. What's that?
I bought the post-style pay-per-view, by the way, because I'm actually a Terrence Crawford fan.
So you're able to support by buying the pay-per-view. But these fans are not buying the pay-per-views for Terrence Crawford. So you can't say that on one end and say that, oh, these other guys are ducking them. And then on the other side, you can't say that Errol Spence is ducking them when Terrence Crawford ain't doing what is necessary to force a fight with Errol Spence Jr. They talking about Errol Spence said this or Errol Spence said that. I'm like this. Why didn't Terrence Crawford force his hand, almost similar to the situation where Gennady Golovkin forced the hand of Canelo in a way where he put himself in a position to be the mandatory for Canelo and made Canelo make the decision, right? So why is it that Terrence Crawford did not become the IBF mandatory when he moved up to welterweight and forced the hand of Errol Spence? Because the IBF always honors their mandatories, regardless of who the fighter is.
Yeah.
So you're the mandatory. You could have fought.
Why didn't he petition to fight for Keith Thurman's vacant WBC?
And here's the thing with that, right? At the end of 2017, after Crawford became the undisputed champ, they were actually going to set up, they were still setting up that fight between Crawford and Horn, right?
Yep.
Now, the thing with Crawford and Horn was Bob Arum wanted to make a doubleheader fight with Crawford and Horn and Pacquiao versus Matisse. But they were going to make Pacquiao-Matisse the co-feature bout. And Manny Pacquiao, even though he had, quote-unquote, lost the Horn, said, I'm the biggest draw out of all four of y'all. So why would you put me in as a co-feature? So he pulled out of that, and that's why that fight ended up being in Kuala Lumpur. So they couldn't fight in April of that particular year. So when that original fight date was scrapped, that's when Terrence Crawford could have said, hey, why don't you for me to fight one of those guys for the WBC belt? He didn't do that. He just let things go and followed through and doubled down on fighting Jeff Horn. Because how is it that you could have other guys within top rank, like Vasily Lomachenko, petition to have a fight for the vacant WBC lightweight title against Luke Campbell, but Terrence Crawford can't petition a fight for a vacant WBC belt against Danny Garcia or Sean Porter? Come on.
He would have had a direct line on it being that he's the 140-pound champ for that same sanctioning body. But I just want to say this, Jay, and I got to go.
Yo.
Basically, what's going on here, from what I can gather, is they are going to yell at the other side of the street while making winnable fights on their building him up to be the guy that no one wants to fight while he destroys inferior opposition, while the other guy on the side of the street has a tough road and is actually selling pay-per-views and beating top-level opposition. And then they're going to, when he clears out that side completely, they're going to do a cross-promotional fight or try to get Manny Pacquiao at the end of his career. That's all I can sum up with Top Rank's plan for Terrence Crawford. And since he has a guaranteed contract, he doesn't seem to mind.
He doesn't. And we kind of talked about this, so.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that, and then I got to go. I really appreciate it. Great show.
All right, no doubt, man, no doubt. And that was Brother Jamil on. And, my thing is to follow up with the thing with, Manny Pacquiao. The thing with Pacquiao is that, recently we heard, folks have heard from, his, former longtime trainer, Freddie Roach. And Roach feels like Manny Pacquiao will not return to the ring this year. That'll be next year until he fights again. And that means it'll be since, that fight against Keith Thurman in July 2019 that Manny Pacquiao has fought. Now, you had, that situation where before the Keith Thurman fight. Manny Pacquiao fought against Adrian Broner, and that particular matchup was at the beginning of 2019. So that was around January 19th. So you could see Manny Pacquiao back around that same time in 2021. And, talks were kind of like aligning, like Manny Pacquiao was going to fight Mikey Garcia next. And so if you have Manny Pacquiao fighting Mikey Garcia, where does that leave Terrence Crawford? If he's going to go ahead and he's going to be fighting Kell Brook, and that's in November, because they have this, set date set for like November, pretty much around November 14th, right? So if Crawford is set to be fighting on November 14th, then he's not going to be able to fight Manny Pacquiao around, I would say, next year or something like that. Even with the thing for, even with the thing for Manny Pacquiao, if he does fight Mikey Garcia in January of 2021, where would that leave Terrence Crawford? Would pretty much be on the outs. So the thing with Terrence Crawford is this, right? They keep talking about Terrence Crawford fighting Manny Pacquiao, where he could possibly fight Manny Pacquiao. But who's going to put up the money for Manny Pacquiao to fight their opponent? Will Bob Arum put up the money for Manny Pacquiao to fight Terrence Crawford? Or does PBC or Al Heyman Boxing have the larger guarantee for maybe, the winner of Spence versus Danny Garcia to fight Manny Pacquiao? So I think a higher guarantee comes from the PBC side. You might see that happening with Manny Pacquiao after fighting Mikey Garcia. If he defeats Mikey Garcia, fighting either Errol Spence or Danny Garcia next. And that still leaves Terrence Crawford out. So I see Terrence Crawford fighting the likes of Kell Brook. Then he's going to wait for the winner of Jose Ramirez versus Josh Taylor, because Ramirez is about to fight. He's about to fight this weekend. He finally has that fight against Victor Postol that's supposed to be happening on the 20th. That's finally happening. He'll have that fight. Josh Taylor will have his fight against the mandatory. If those fighters win out, they're going to have the undisputed super lightweight title fight before the end of this year. So that's going to be out of the way. And then that would have another fighter there for Terrence Crawford to fight. So you're going to have Terrence Crawford fighting, Jose Benavidez, right? Kirgis Kavaliauskas, then Kell Brook, and then the winner of Jose Ramirez Taylor at welterweight. That's his welterweight resume. That isn't going to fly if people are going to say, hey, this is the top welterweight in the world, or this is one of the top guys pound for pound. How can you have a resume like that and say that you're among the top guys pound for pound or the top welterweight? That can't work. He's going to have to fight one of those other guys. And my thing is, and I've said this before and I've said it again, Bob Arum and Top Rank have little to no issue having their guys fighting other fighters in other promotional groups or other promotional companies, as long as they have the confidence that their fighter is going to win. I'm not saying Now, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, we've seen it with Jose Ramirez against Maurice Hooker in that unification fight. We've seen it with Vasyl Lomachenko versus Luke Campbell. Okay, we've seen it with the signed, sealed, delivered rematch between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. But what have we seen from Top Rank side that says, oh, their fighter goes up against another fighter in another promotional company and they have a feeling that their fighter is going to lose? They haven't really done that, at least not recently. I have not seen it. So I want to know if they have their guy Terrence Crawford, if he is out there available to fight the likes of a Sean Porter or your Dennis Ugas or Keith Thurman or anybody like that without any issues. Because in the past, Top Rank's representatives did say that they don't mind having Crawford going to an event that's a Fox or a Showtime event. So if that's the case, why not offer him up to PBC for one quick time? Yes, right? If ESPN can't necessarily do a pay-per-view, except for the one pay-per-view for Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, if you're not able to pay Terrence Crawford that pay-per-view money through ESPN, why not offer him through either Fox or Showtime and have him fight Keith Thurman? Why not? If they have that pay-per-view money, why not put him up there to go up against a Keith Thurman? That's all I'm saying. Right? So that's one thing that we had there in reference to Terrence Crawford. And I mean, we've kind of like said this for weeks that he was going to end up fighting Kell Brook. We know about the situation in reference to the thing there between, Top Rank and ESPN and having those type of things. But they have like a good little schedule that they're trying to build up. But you can't tell me that you have Terrence Crawford on ESPN Plus pay-per-view if you want to give him that guarantee. If you have the money, go ahead and do it. Fox has money. Showtime has money. ESPN should have money. Basically, it's Disney. So, I mean, Disney has both Fox and ABC. So y'all should basically have the money for it. But if y'all want to just go ahead and just say, hey, Terrence Crawford is going to go ahead and fight Kell Brook, just go ahead and get it over with, get it done, and don't have this whole talk about, oh, these other guys don't want to fight him, when there's been other people within that quote-unquote other side of the street that have said that they wanted to fight with Terrence Crawford, and there hasn't been any response to it. That can't work. Now, speaking of somebody else that wanted smoke with Terrence Crawford, over the past couple of days, one of the frequent guests of the Boxing Source radio show, the WBC featherweight champion of Mr. Gary Russell Jr., did take on the social media airwaves and called out Terrence Crawford once again, because he had the word of what the direction of Terrence Crawford would be, and that was leaning towards Kell Brook. And Gary Russell Jr. was very disappointed. He's like, hey, Slim, man, I knew you had those tendencies, man. I ain't gonna say what he said, but it's out there. And he said, I knew you had those tendencies, man. And he recalled another story in the amateurs where Gary Allen Russell, one of his brothers, one that is, a second trainer, or it's kind of like they're with the brothers, holding the mess for them to do their training and everything like that. Almost like a booby hair type of guy there, but he was a fighter in the amateurs. Back in the day at a higher weight than Gary Russell Jr. And he said that in one of the amateur fights that his brother had, he was losing the fight, and that Terrence Crawford and a couple of other people or fighters that were there within the amateurs was watching the fight as well. And he said Terrence Crawford was like, "Y'all brought me out here to see this," and Gary Russell Jr. was like, "Oh, y'all say something?" Said they ain't really saying nothing. And then they continued behind Gary Russell Jr.'s back. And he said he came up to him and he said, are y'all going to say something? Y'all have something to say it right now. He said they didn't say anything. So he's like, man, I knew he's talking about like Terrence Crawford was a sucker. I'm like, man, like Gary Russell Jr. wants that smoke, man. And I just found it kind of interesting to me because even though, yes, I cover the sport, but I am a fan. And as a fan of the sport, I would rather see Terrence Crawford versus Gary Russell Jr. than Terrence Crawford versus Kell Brook. That's just me. I'd rather see that. I'd rather see Terrence Crawford versus Gary Russell Jr. than a Terrence Crawford versus a Kell Brook fight. But that's just me, right? So, I mean, whatever, ends up happening with the WBC featherweight champion of the world, we'll see what happens with that. I'll catch up with Mr. Gary Russell Jr. A little bit later on this week to see what's going on with him. Of course, not only did he, try to pursue a fight with Terrence Crawford, but he also tried to pursue a fight with Devin Haney, and Devin Haney's leaning towards fighting Yuriorkis Gamboa. So, I mean, that is what that is in that sense. So that's, what we got reference to the thing there with Gary Russell Jr. Now, you also did have something reference to the thing there with, Anthony Joshua. Joshua was, talking about, what would be happening in a fight between him and Tyson Fury. He said that, that Tyson Fury, he has a lot of respect for him, that he's a good family man and a good fighter. But, on the other hand, he wants to break his head. That he said on, one show here earlier called The League of Their Own. Wasn't that a movie though? All right, anyway. He said that he is very confident that he will be able to take him out in the first 6 rounds. He says that, I've had a shorter career, so I'm fresher. I've been in the deep end longer, so I can handle it. I believe that I'm going to take him out. Fury drew the first and then rejigged his game plan and took Wilder out in the rematch and schooled him really, but I think I'm faster than Wilder anyway. Call it what you want. I believe I'm better. Now, my thing about the fight as far as like the matchups between Fury and Wilder and Fury and Joshua are different. I think with the thing with Fury and Wilder is not as active with his hands, and Fury only more active with his hands. He has a longer reach, he has a better jab, and he moves his head. I've always said for years that Wilder has problems against fighters that move their head, have very good head movement, and can move around the ring. Anyone that's stationary, he could pretty much deal with because all he has is the 1-2 punch combo. He could use a jab or utilize whatever jab he has to kind of like use his reach, and he could just come down the pipe with his right hand. But if he has someone that he's kind of like dealing with that has head movement, like like a Carlos Takam, like an Archer Spilka. He's going to have issues with those guys. He had issues with Tyson Fury in the first fight with Tyson Fury, parrying jabs and moving around with his head and things like that. The only thing is that once Fury moved his head down, that's when Wilder had a chance to like come in with a hook instead of just trying to keep going with the jab. But in the second fight, all Fury did was just come forward at Deontay Wilder, and Wilder just could not fight on his back foot very well in reference to that with someone that is, kind of and has a longer reach in him. Now, with Wilder has been able to catch people while being on his back foot. I mentioned Archer Spilka. When he knocked out Archer Spilka, he was backing up to the ropes, leading Spilka in, and then cut him with the right hand before, Spilka could throw in with the left. But Spilka is a much shorter guy than Tyson Fury, doesn't have that reach. So all Tyson Fury has to do is just come in with the jab, come in, boom, boom, boom. And that's what he did. Basically walked on Deontay Wilder. And in the third fight, it's kind of like what I've been expecting here as well. And that's Deontay Wilder either becomes more aggressive with his punches, or he goes the Tyson Fury route and moves his head, gives Fury different looks, moves around the ring. For years within the podcast, I've heard from the president of the Deontay Wilder fan club and the vice president of the Deontay Wilder fan club, and they told me that Deontay Wilder is an athlete. He's athletic. He could do this. He's a basketball player. He could dunk basketball. He's athletic. Okay, if he's athletic, then he should be able to use his legs and move around the ring and utilize the ring and be able to give Tyson Fury different looks and not be stationary right in front of Tyson Fury, if that's the case. So in this third fight, if you want to see an improvement from Deontay Wilder, I need to see much better head and foot movement from Deontay Wilder. Or else he's going to get walked down again. He's going to get beat down again. It's not going to be pretty. And we don't want that for a third fight. We want a very competitive third fight that says, okay, these two guys are among the best in the heavyweight division. It can't be, as clear cut as having one guy in Tyson Fury and another guy in Anthony Joshua as the two guys that are the best within the heavyweight division. That just can't work. You got to be able to see if this is going to be a very competitive fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, scheduled for the end of this year, pretty much around, I would say, the second or third week of December. I think they're going to kind of like put this particular fight and the fight between Anthony Joshua and Pulev pretty much within a week's time of each other to try to see if they can align for the winners to fight each other for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. And now things have kind of cleared up for that since we had Dillian Whyte lose to Alexander Povetkin last weekend. They are planning the rematch between Dillian Whyte and Alexander Povetkin. It says it's going to be around, I guess, November or something like that. But even with that, that kind of delays the timing for that WBC mandatory. So the mandatory position kind of like switches up now since Dylan White lost. So with that being said, kind of like holds off when that WBC mandatory can be called, even though people don't kind of like honor the WBC mandatory anyway in the heavyweight division. But we all do want to see an undisputed heavyweight champion, a 4-belt undisputed heavyweight champion. And with this, we kind of like get a little bit closer towards that. And I feel like that's going to be the case here. We do have, the mandatory for the WBO in Alexander Usyk, but he's only had like one fight in the heavyweight division, and that wasn't really much of a fight. They've been trying to make the fight between Alexander Usyk and Derek Chisora, but that, we haven't had anything solidifying that fight to take place. So it's like, what are they waiting for in reference to the WBO? I don't know. But they did have, of course, in, like a verbal agreement or something like that between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury as far as like a 2-fight deal between those two, slated for the summer of 2021, maybe around the same time, 2021. But that's still, still 12 months away. So it's like, hey, and it's the heavyweight division. We just saw it last weekend. Anything can happen in the heavyweight division, I guess. So that's why I said with that third fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, anything could happen within the heavyweight division. I just feel like if Tyson Fury pretty much does the same thing that he did in the second fight, he'll pretty much get the same result. I haven't seen what Deontay Wilder could do that would make it be much different in the when it does come up. So that's that right there, man. And I mean, that's pretty much what wanted to cover. We do have, like I said, action that's coming up this weekend. You have Jose Ramirez against Victor Postol, with Victor Postol being the mandatory contender for the WBC super lightweight title. Jose Ramirez is WBO and WBC super lightweight champion. So he's going to be defending both of those titles. It's like the third time that they've tried to make this fight. Of course, it was originally scheduled for February 1st in China. You know what happened with that. I think, and they tried it again around, I think, either June or July. They tried to have this fight over in California. Still no. So trying to hear August 29th, Las Vegas in the bubble. And they're going to have a good series of fights on there. It's about like 8 fights that they'll have on that card. But also, they will have Daniel Dubois on there against Ricardo Snijders in the main event in London earlier in the day. Kind of like setting up for that Daniel Dubois versus Joe Joyce fight. And we also have Erislandy Lara versus Greg Venditti for the WBA regular super welterweight title. And we'll have Alfredo Angulo versus Caleb Truax in the super middleweight eliminator bout. So we're going to see if Alfredo Angulo could score another upset there in the super middleweight division. So we got that going down as well. And I'm looking, ahead for this series of fights. September 5th, we're going to have Jamel Herring was a guest on the podcast. He's going up against Jonathan Akendo for that WBO super featherweight title. The other guest that was on the show, Steven Nelson, so cold Steven Nelson, will be going up against DeAndre Ware. He is there at the super middleweight division. He's going to be campaigning to become a top contender for a super middleweight title. So I'm going to be on the lookout for that. And the real big baby, Jared Anderson, will be back in the ring against Rodney Hernandez, which, we had the trainer there for Jared Anderson, on the show with us a couple of weeks ago. You could catch that through iTunes. When we had trainer Derry Riley there talking about Jared Anderson, and he did kind of hint that, this fight was going to be happening. So that's what we got. Jared Anderson versus Rodney Hernandez there. So we're going to be looking to see if Jared Anderson is going to, get a, fairly impressive win there to kind of like build on his momentum as a heavyweight contender. So we're going to be, looking out for that. But that's, what I have here. So for this particular live boxing talk, thanks for those that have joined in. We will have the podcast there scheduled for Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Be sure to catch us live. And we will have a simulcast here on YouTube. So you could join us either through calling in or through the simulcast on YouTube on Sunday night. So be sure to join us then at that particular point. But until then, I will catch y'all later. Peace out.